Well, thank you all for being here today. It's just wonderful to have everybody with us again. Um, for those who weren't on for the weather report, we're getting a slight amount of rain here in Rock Hill. Most of the state of South Carolina is getting a little bit, but really not enough to end the drought or to do anything much with the fires that are burning to the west. But it is delightful to hear the gentle rain falling on the roof. It's good day for a nap, that's for sure. So the title, if you read the email, the title of the talk is "What Was I Thinking?" and it's kind of a sarcastic reflection. What was I thinking? And it just reminds me of, I don't know, perhaps this never happened to you, but it certainly happened to me, where you do something, and at the time it seems perfectly reasonable. You do something, and then later on you just look back on it and you say, what in the world was I thinking? How did I ever think that was gonna work out okay? It might be one of those things that you jump into with both feet, with full of optimism, and not quite not quite listening to all those little voices that tell you this probably isn't a good idea. This probably isn't a good idea. Just one example from my life is, and it's kind of fun. Years and years ago, a buddy and I worked at the phone company, and we were always reading through the magazines that had all these income opportunities, was the name of the magazine, and it had all these different businesses you could go into, products you could sell, and all these things. And we were going to find something that we could make $1 billion and retire from the phone company. So we decided on this one product, and it was called a puddle jumper. Now, what a puddle jumper is it's like a wooden propeller from a model airplane that goes in a horizontal plane, and then a vertical dowel stick, just a little round dowel stick that you can get at any hobby shop. And they're kind of glued together. And then you take the dowel stick and you put it between the palm of your two hands, and you just kind of rub one hand away from the other, and that spins the dowel stick. It rotates it. Of course, the propeller creates lift, and this thing goes flying through the air. And of course, these were beautiful. The ones that we bought were they were made of special wood, and they were carved, and they were finished with lacquer, and they were just absolutely gorgeous. So we decided that this was it. This was the thing that was going to catch on. It was going to be the next Frisbee, And we wound up getting the territorial rights to the entire state of North Carolina. Nobody could sell these things in the entire state of North Carolina unless they came through us first, because we were kind of the kingpins. And we put our money together, and we went and we bought some inventory. And I don't know how many dozens of these things we had, but we had boxes of them. And we went around to the different flea markets and trade shows and things like that in the area, and we set up a little tent, and he and I would get out in the midway, and we would fly this thing back and forth all day long. And we had them for sale. I think that we were selling them for $4 a piece in the 70s. That was a lot of money. And the kids would come by, and they would love them, and they would say, Daddy, can we get one of those? And Daddy would say, when I get home, I'll make you one for about 25 cents. And that was it. So we sold, I think, a total of 3 or 4 in about a year's time, and gave up. What were we thinking? What we were thinking that this was just going to be a fantastic opportunity, and it turned out to be a dud. And I think it's in these moments of self-reflection, particularly if we have a sense of humor about it, if we go back and laugh, that we can really learn something about ourselves. And I was thinking of this last night. It reminded me of the clip of WKRP in Cincinnati. If anybody remembers the show, if you don't, you can just go to Google and Google the turkey drop, WKRP turkey drop. But it was around Thanksgiving, and the manager of the radio station decided to hold this big public event, to generate awareness and advertising for the radio station. And they got all these people to gather at a supermarket parking lot for free turkeys, and they flew the news helicopter over the parking lot, and they started throwing live turkeys out of the helicopter, And of course, it was just a total disaster. People started panicking and rioting and all kinds of things. And the very last scene of the episode, just as the credits are rolling, the very last scene comes up, and Gordon Jump was the actor who played Mr. Carlson on the show, and it's classic. He says, "As God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly," and that's it. The show cuts. What was he thinking? He thought turkeys could fly. So we can look around. Typically, we look around when things are not going well, and ask ourselves, what in the world is somebody thinking? You look at America's Funniest Home Videos and some of these things on YouTube. The people do incredible things. As I saw one where a young man decided to run and jump from one rooftop to another across an alley. And he's like 2 or 3 stories up in the air, and he missed. And he's kind of sliding down the wall and banging off the fire escapes and landed in a dumpster somewhere. And he jumps back up in the dumpster and he waves to his buddy holding the camera. I'm okay. I'm thinking, what in the world was he thinking? He just absolutely had no idea that this might not work. I'm just going to go fly through the air like Superman. So it's easy to kind of look at the humorous side, and I think it's good. But what we have to do is you have to take a little bit deeper. See, and it's not just those people out there that do silly things. It's certainly me that does silly things. It's certainly us who do silly things. But there's a lesson there. There's a couple of lessons here, you see. The first is there's an acknowledgement between what we think and what we do. Even though we may not work through the process very thoroughly, there is an acknowledgement that, my God, the things that we do are a result of what we have thought, And then, of course, that raises the question of, well, what is thought? See, what is thinking? We talk about it all the time. Well, I was thinking this and I was thinking that. Or a thought occurred to me. But what is thinking, you see? What is thought? How does it happen? Where does it come from? Where does it go? Deep question. Deep question comes from that. And of course, if you go to the dictionary, and I've mentioned this a time or two before, when you go to the dictionary, it's kind of no help, to me anyway. They always go into a circular argument. So if you look up the definition of thought, it is the product of thinking, and if you look up thinking, it is the process of producing thought. So there you have it. They don't know either. But the one thing that I did take out of the dictionary definition when it talks about thought, it said it's an idea or a notion that can either be arrived at through the process of thinking, or it can just spontaneously arise, like a sudden thought, like boom, there's this thought that just kind of dropped into our heads. Where did it come from? And whose is it? See, whose is it? That's probably a deeper question. Now, we as human beings, we have an ability that, as far as we know, other sentient beings don't have. The animals that are highly capable of thinking, we don't know whether or not they have this ability. We certainly know that other animals can think, and they can learn, and they can change their behavior based on what they learn. We know that. There's an intelligence there at work, They can recognize each other. I was reading something to one of my grandchildren here the other week about dolphins. And dolphins give themselves a name early on in their lives, and it's a unique whistle signature, and other dolphins learn that name. And when they want to communicate or gain the attention or whatever dolphins do, they whistle the name of that other dolphin. That other dolphin knows that whatever's going on pertains to them, if as much as we can know what dolphins know, But we as human beings, we have the ability of self-reflection, of introspection. We can think about what we're thinking about. We can ask ourselves, well, where did that thought come from? We can ask ourselves if the thought involves an acceptance of something as being true, which is the definition of belief, Well, what do we believe? The things that we believe, according to Webster, are the things that we accept to be true. We accept them as being true. So some some things just come and go, and they really don't mean a whole lot to us. We don't pay a whole lot of attention to them. It's just kind of like they're passing through. But where did they come from? Did they generate from somewhere within our consciousness? Did they generate somewhere within our mind? Or are they kind of floating around in the collective unconscious, perhaps, as Carl Jung would say, or the race consciousness, as Ernest Holmes would say? Or are we immersed in this atmosphere of thought, and every once in a while we tune into something that's not entirely our own, but we can think it's our own. We can accept it as true that it's our own, but it's not our own. If we stay with it a while, if we stay with our spiritual growth, I think we eventually come to realize that not everything that we become aware of as taking place in consciousness is ours. We may be tuning into something else that's going on around us. We may be becoming aware of thoughts that we didn't generate, let me put it that way. Maybe they're thoughts that other people are thinking. Maybe they are thoughts that are just there. In Man and His Symbols, Carl Jung talks about the collective unconscious, and he talks about people from many different cultures of many different times have the same symbols in our dreams. In our dreams, we kind of dream the same themes and the same symbols, because somehow we're more alike than we are different. Somehow there's this collective unconscious, he would put it, that we are tapped into and we are part of. And the way we tend to describe it is the ocean and the wave. We're all like waves on the ocean, but down below the surface we're connected. So the first thing that this humorous exploration of what in the world was I thinking, what was I thinking when I got involved in that, is that we as human beings can reflect upon what we're thinking. We have that ability. Now, do we use it? And how much do we use it? No, we don't do it. It's a God-given talent that we have that, as far as we know, no other creature on earth has it. But do we use it? Not a bit. Not hardly at all. The proof of the pudding is just look at society, look at the world in which we live, and you can ask yourself, what were they thinking? But there's a deeper level, a spiritual level that we want to go to, because we are told that there's this power in many different ways, in many different cultures. It's described, Dr. Holmes called it the law of mind, that there's this power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief, you can see this in Old Testament theology, in Psalms, I guess 23:7, as you think and believe in your heart, as you think and believe in your heart, so it is. We're told in the New Testament, pray believing in your heart that it is done and it shall be done. Shall being a command, like must be done. It will be done. Not might, not if, but it shall be done. We are told in Buddhism, everything you experience is a result of what you have thought. We are told by the Stoic philosophers what the mind can conceive, what we can think, or what we can become aware of as a thought, and believe. Not just think, but believe. What the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve. So there's this deeper level then of thinking. Thoughts come, thoughts go, thoughts pass through my mind. Some of the thoughts may be mine, I may generate them through an orderly process. I may say, well, what am I going to have supper tonight? And I say, well, last night I had chicken, and the night before that I had fish, and gee, I haven't had spaghetti for a long time. I think I'll have spaghetti tonight. So I have arrived at a decision. I have had a thought that I will have spaghetti tonight, and I have accepted that thought as, well, this is going to be my supper tonight. This is going to be spaghetti. But there was a logical process that was involved in that, you see. And then other thoughts, as I say, they just boom, they're just there. They just pop into your head, and they're there. And we don't know necessarily why they're there, and we don't know where they came from. But we do know that in learning how to meditate, one of the benefits of learning meditation is that we can break this bond of ownership that we tend to have. See, we tend to accept that any thought that appears in the screen of our mind is our thought and we own it. And as we learn how to meditate, we become detached from them. We become detached and we can say, oh look, a thought is occurring. Oh look, there goes a thought. Where did the thought come from? Where did the thought go to? For whom did the thought arise? And all of that process, that spiritual practice and meditation, in that vein, that is called analytical meditation. All of that process, what it does is it helps us to become aware of the fact that we don't have to own everything that passes through our heads. We don't have to. It's there. We can observe it. We can let it go, or we can act upon it. But it's a choice. It is a deliberate choice that we get to make if we choose to practice in that manner. That's a big if. If we choose to become self-reflective, if we choose to become observers. You know, if we look upon society and we look upon our own lives, it's just like so many things that are going on are because people are acting as if they're victims of their own thoughts. I had no other choice but to do what I did. You know, this person said something and it offended me, and I had to go punch him in the nose, or whatever nonsense you see going on. You know, and this simple premise that I had no other choice but to be offended because of what they said is something that we have to push back on. Yes, there's a choice. No, you don't have to be offended. What they said, it's about them, not about you. You don't have to take it personally. See, we start to take ownership. We start to take ownership of what is passing through our mind. And we can't necessarily stop. Some people say they can. They can stop thought from occurring. Some of the gurus and the adepts. But you and I, probably where we are, that's not a realistic goal. But we can ignore. We can ignore in terms of we don't have to be attached to accepting everything that comes into our mind as being true and requiring us to do something about it. We can accept that. So a deeper question is not necessarily was I thinking, what was I thinking? But probably a more pertinent question is what was I believing? What was I believing? It's done unto you according to your belief, you see. Not always as you think, but according to your belief. What was I believing? And a belief, as I say, is a kind of a thought that we have attached a little bit more meaning to. We have accepted it as being true. We've accepted it as being true. I believe this. This I believe to be true. You hear people say that all the time. But even in the use of the word believe and belief, the way that we use it in our language, belief really implies more of an opinion. I think this is true. This might be true. I'm pretty sure it's true. I believe it's true. But there's a little bit of doubt in there. There's a little bit of wiggle room. There's an acknowledgement that says, well, there's other ways of believing. There's other ways of thinking about this, you know. Somebody asks you what is the best solution to the problem, and you might know that there's more than one solution to the problem. So you say, well, I believe the best solution is this. But I may know very well that somebody else believes that there's another solution that's a better solution. The hardware engineer might believe that the software people need to fix it. The software people might believe that the hardware people need to fix it. At least that's been my experience in working with designers. So everybody has an opinion, and they call that opinion their belief. But I want you to think about this, that, you know, we have a thought, thoughts come, thoughts go. A belief is something we have a little bit more vested interest into it. Okay? We're willing to come forward and make a statement, as wishy-washy as it may be. We're willing to come forward and make a statement that says, well, I believe, this I believe this. But even in that, there's a little bit of wiggle room. So, well, it's okay, somebody else may believe something else. There might be another way of believing about it. It's possible that what I believe may not be entirely true. Maybe there's something I don't know. But right now, given everything that I have in front of me, this is what I believe. And then we move to the level of faith. Right? Now, faith, as Dr. Holmes tells us, faith is a knowing so certain that an idea to the opposite cannot enter your mind. It's just you just can't even think of it. It just doesn't even seem possible. It's kind of like the kid running and jumping off the roof. Did he even think that he wasn't going to make it? Probably not. Probably not. Probably had such great confidence in his own ability, albeit not great, the greatest thought process, but he had this great confidence that somehow he was going to magically fly across this 20-foot alley and land on the roof of the other building, just like the people in the movies do, even though you can't see the wires on the people in the movie that carry them across. So when we enter the world of faith, we enter the world of a knowing so certain that a thought to the opposite never enters our mind. Now, we typically think of faith as being something devout, something spiritual in nature, something that the saints would have, and people who live in cloisters, in monasteries or convents, and they spend their entire life in deep prayer and spiritual practice, a deep, deep faith. And we have to kind of step back from that definition, if that's our definition. We have to say, no, faith is a belief so certain that anything to the opposite cannot enter my consciousness. I never even think about a different possibility. And with regard to that, we all have that kind of deep, abiding faith. We all have it in something. We all get up out of bed this morning, and I don't think there's a one of us who wondered if gravity was still going to be working this morning. Now, if somebody was out partying last night, you might have felt that way. But I don't think anybody seriously entertained the idea that when the alarm clock went off this morning, that gravity just may not be working today. Maybe today's the day that you throw off the blanket and you just kind of float out of bed and go all the way up to the ceiling. Now, we had absolute, complete faith in gravity. The idea that gravity would not be working today just simply did not occur to us. And that's what I'm talking about, and that's what Dr. Holmes is talking about when he uses his definition of faith. So we start to say, well, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? And we can approach it from a humorous point of view, which I like to do most of the time. But perhaps a deeper question is we can look at the world, we can look at our own lives, and we can say, what was I believing? What was I believing? When we were doing classes, when I was teaching classes at the center, we would sometimes give a homework assignment and ask people to just go through the week and whatever they observed, ask themselves, what would somebody have to believe to be true in order for what they did, that action that they did, to make sense to them, to make sense to them. See, a lot of times we get so involved in, we want to change behavior, we want to force somebody to behave in a different way, or we want to at least influence them to behave in a different way, and we never consider the belief system that's involved. And we have to understand that they are behaving in the way that they are behaving because there's something very, very deeply held in their belief system. And unless we can understand what that is, and unless we can facilitate a change in the beliefs, then anything we do is going to fail. Now here's an example. One time I was in Toronto and I was coming back to the U.S. And of course, when you're in an international airport like that, the U.S. in Toronto, we had U.S. Customs and Immigration. And we would go through there, and then you're stuck. There's an international passengers lounge, and that's all you can do is just sit there and wait until your flight comes. and I was sitting there and got engaged in a conversation with a gentleman who was sitting there. And it turns out he worked for a mining company, like digging minerals out of the ground in mines. And he was a project manager, a troubleshooter, project manager. So he would have to go out into the field wherever something wasn't working the way it should be working, which in business meant they weren't getting the results that they wanted. He would have to go out and try to figure out what was going on and come up with a solution. And he said one time they were opening a mine in India, and they did everything they needed to do. They got the permits, that they needed from the government. They were able to secure the rights to mine the minerals from this particular piece of property. And then they had to start construction, and construction meant they had to put roads in because this location was way out in the jungle somewhere. And they shipped over heavy equipment, bulldozers and all those kind of things to start building the roads. And the project was just getting woefully behind. The roads just weren't getting put in. And he said he didn't know why, so he had to go. So he flew over to whatever the closest major airport was and got on a chartered helicopter that was going to fly him out to the mining site. And he says as they started to get close, the pilot pointed out there's the location over there. And he says, and they could see the road. They could see where the road started, off of whatever road they had to start their cut from. They could see where the road had started. And the helicopter pilot flew over the road, and he says, as they got up the road just a little ways, he says, there were all of the bulldozers and heavy equipment pieces that the mining company had shipped over. They were just kind of pushed off the side of the road and parked in the jungle. And as they flew further up the road, when they got to the very front of where the construction on the road was taking place, there were people riding elephants pushing the trees down. And this came up in the context because he and I were talking about change and facilitating cultural change within business. And he said what they didn't realize at the time when whenever they were doing this, what they didn't realize is that operating machinery was assigned to one class of people. That was one caste or one class of people. That was their job. And clearing the land was the job of another class of people, but that class of people was not allowed to use machinery. So what they had was a deep cultural conflict in that the people who knew how to drive bulldozers weren't allowed to clear the land, and the people who were allowed to clear the land weren't allowed to drive bulldozers. And it wasn't until they went in there and made changes, and they had to go get different people to drive the bulldozers from a different culture to come in and drive the bulldozers. They couldn't get anywhere. But if you would look and say, well, what was going on there? What was going on? We would say, well, what would they have to believe in order for that to make sense? What would they have to believe in order for that to make sense? And the one group believed it was not their job to clear the land, and the other group believed it was not their job to drive bulldozers. It was wrong for them to do that. It was a taboo in their society, in their culture, whichever group it was, whichever culture it was that was doing this. So we can look and we can say, well, what was I thinking? But it's more meaningful to go in and say, what was I believing? And it's even more meaningful to go in and say, well, what did I have faith in? What did I have faith in? And it's one thing, and it's very easy to go look at the splinter in your brother's eye instead of the plank in your own. It's very easy to go look at somebody else and say, well, what kind of beliefs do they hold? What do they have faith in order for them to behave the way they do? But the real growth comes when we look in the mirror. We look in the mirror. You see, we can intellectually grasp the concept, and we can believe it. We can accept some truth in it, that life is a matter of what we believe. It is done unto us according to our belief, right? It is intention and attention. What do I want to have happen? What am I paying attention to? What do I accept to be true? What do I believe? It's one thing to say that, and it's another to realize it, to reflect upon it. So in this regard, what happens is we can look at our entire lives. We can look at every circumstance in our lives, everything that is going on in our lives, and accept the fact or realize the fact that everything in my life is a record of what I believe. It is a record of what I have faith in. Whether I like it or not, whether I like to admit that or not, it must be so, because it is done unto us according to our belief. And now we kind of, this really gets to be tough for folks. See, it's a lot easier to divert our attention away from it than to go in and do the deep spiritual work that we are here to do. Because there's things that happen in our lives that we don't know what we believe. We don't have a clue what we believed about that, you see. And now do I drive myself crazy? Do I drive myself crazy trying to figure out, well what did I believe? What did I believe when this particular event happened? What could I possibly have believed? Where did that belief come from? Kind of psychoanalysis, you know. Can I find the original event that was going on when I adopted that belief? Can I somehow go in and erase it? And we get all balled up in this kind of trying to discover what caused it, what caused this belief. And we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that at all. In fact, it's counterproductive. Dr. Holmes tells us we're complex beings, and what goes on in our life is the interaction of many different things that we believe. So we're not likely to go in there and find any one belief that we can just kind of reach in and pick it out and root it up. But we can be aware, we can be self-reflective. See, we can be aware of the fact that whatever is going on is a reflection of something that I believe, something that I have accepted to be true, and perhaps I have accepted it so completely that the idea to the opposite can never enter my mind. And once we know that, you see, once we know that, then our life is a report card. Our life is a report card of our consciousness, whatever consciousness is. I don't know that we can get into that. But whatever our consciousness is, our thought plus our feeling, is the best I can define it for you today. Whatever our thought plus feeling happens to be, it shows in our lives. It shows in everything we do. It shows in everything that happens in our lives. And if we accept that, then all we have to do is say, where in my life is there an opportunity for me to show more of God? I'm not saying to get caught up in trying to find negative ideas and pull them out like weeds. It's just, where in my life would I like to show more of God? And wherever that happens to be, we can say, well, the only reason that I am not showing enough of God in that area, or as much of God as I would like, is because there must be some idea, some erroneous idea that I have accepted as being true that's blocking it. That's standing in the way. The gifts have already been given, you see. The omnipresence is already right here. And if I don't realize it, it's because perhaps I never consciously decided to realize it. My desire, my intention, my passion is not there. I'm not seeking God as earnestly as I would be seeking a pond if my hair was on fire. Or maybe there's something that I have accepted into my belief system, albeit below my conscious belief system. I have accepted something as being true that's not true. And that's all we have to know. And then we say, well, if there's something there that's not true, how do I get rid of it? How do I get rid of it? So first thing is, life is a matter of what we believe and what we have faith in, because there's a power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief. As we think and believe in our hearts, so are we. Pray believing in your heart, and it shall be so. What the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve. And now what I want to do is I want to use that God-given talent of self-reflection to become aware of what is going on in my life. How much time do we spend getting ready to go to work every day? How much time do we spend at work every day? How much time do we spend commuting to work every day? How much time do we spend exercising and cleaning our bodies and washing and all of those things? And if you take all that and I say, now how much time do we spend every day reflecting upon what we think, using the one talent that we know we have, that's so far we don't believe any other creature has, that one talent of self-reflection, how much time do we spend with that? How much time do we spend deliberately choosing what we will think, deliberately choosing what we will believe, deliberately instilling faith into our consciousness? Dr. Holmes says faith is a matter of thought, and we can change our thinking. Right? The tagline to Science of Mind magazine for many years was change your thinking, change your life. It may still be their tagline. So this brings us back to attention. What are you paying attention to in your life every day? Are you looking at the circumstances of your life and saying, there's an opportunity here for me to learn, to grow closer to God in some aspect of my life? Is your health as perfect as you would like it to be? Who is the author of your health? Is it your doctor? Is it the divine? What beliefs might you hold to be true about health? The diseases your parents had are going to come upon you. All of those things. We just have an opportunity to go back and say, as Emma Curtis Hopkins would say, God is my health. God is my health. And God is perfect. How about the finances in your life? Are you demonstrating as much supply as you would like? What is your supply? Is it your job? Is it your portfolio? Or is it your connection with the unlimited supply of the universe? Is there an opportunity in the area of supply for me to grow closer to God? How about my loving relationships? Do they reflect the unity of the divine, the unconditional love of God? How about my activities? Are they fulfilling? Or are they a drudgery? Do I go to work just so I can make enough money to do what I want to do when I'm not at work? Or is every day an opportunity to express the love of God? And what about my spiritual attunement? What about my growth? What about this very day? Have I grown closer, nearer to Thee? Have I turned my back to the world of materialism and everything that I'm told by society and culture that is wrong, and just stepped a little bit closer into the presence of God, which is here, which is now, but which must be realized? What was I thinking? What was I thinking? We can look back on our lives and see that what outpictured in our lives was a result of our thought, a result of our beliefs, whether we knew them or not. But we can't change the past. The past is gone. We can't change the future, but we can create it today because tomorrow is the outpicturing of our thoughts and our beliefs of today. What we can do is we can consciously choose, we can decide what is the most important thing. What is the most important thing that we can do while we're here in this life on this earth? And I ask you and invite you to consider that the most important thing that you can do is to remove the barriers to grow closer to God, to grow closer to God, to the experience of the presence, to the realization of the presence, not just knowing about, yes, there's this thing called God, not just feeling good about it, not just singing it's in every one of us on the way to work. Although that's good, I like to do that. But to really realize that we are spiritual beings, living in a spiritual universe, and the activity of spirit is mental, it is thought. And we have the ability to think, we have the ability to reflect upon what we have thought, we have the ability to change what we are thinking, we have the ability to change what we are believing, we have the ability to change what we have faith in. What it requires is a couple things. The first is our intention. We must have a passion. We must have a passion about growing each and every day nearer to God. The process by which we do that is by changing our thinking and changing our belief. The second thing that we can do is we can become aware of those areas in our lives, those circumstances in our lives where we are not experiencing the fullness of the divine. And we can make a deliberate effort to change our thinking in that area, not by going in and trying to find and uproot the negative ideas that are there, but by simply replacing them through the practice of affirmative prayer, through spiritual mind treatment. To tell ourselves that God is our perfect health, that God is our supply, that God is the very loving relationships in our lives, that God is fulfilling itself through our activities, that God is leading me every day in every way in my perfect spiritual path. To take these things into treatment and to work with them to set the law in motion, to change our consciousness, and to continue to do so until we see the results in our lives. Very important, very important. Dr. Holmes said, treat and keep treating until you see the result. Treat and keep treating until you see the result. We are very short-sighted, or short attention is probably a better way to put it in our culture. Something comes up and everybody gets all excited and then we forget about it. Anybody know what's going on with the Zika virus? A few months ago, that's all you could hear about in the paper. Now it's buried in the lower headlines somewhere. It's still there, still there. But our society tends to do that. We tend to flare up into a big flurry of attention and activity, and we lose sight of it in a very short time. You can't do that with your spiritual growth. You can't do that with your spiritual growth. Your commitment and your dedication. Are you passionate? Are you looking for God as earnestly as you would be looking for a pond if your hair was on fire? And do your daily activities reflect that? Are you spending time in your spiritual practice, in your meditation? Are you, during the course of the day, running through your mind some spiritual truth? God is all there is. God is love. God is good. God is expressing itself as me. Do you have some affirmation that you can roll through your mind even while you're busy working? It just keeps reminding you of who and what you are. A beautiful expression of God. And are you taking any time for your meditation, for your treatment? Now, last thing I want to say about this is that there's two approaches. One is kind of the slow and steady approach we just talked about. reflect upon your life. Be aware of what you're thinking and what you're saying as you are thinking and saying that. For most of us, it starts after. Oh my God, did I really mean to say that? Do I really want to believe that? Try to be aware of what we're thinking and we're saying as or before we're saying, and only speak the things that we wish to experience in our lives. Stop talking bad. Stop talking bad things about the ain't it awfuls. Don't get caught up in the ain't it awfuls. We don't want that to happen. Be aware, be mindful of what's going on. And as things arise that we don't like, we don't really want them in our lives, we can let them go. We can dismiss them. That is not the truth. And then bring our mind back to the truth. God is all there is. God is love. God is peace. God is joy. Use our spiritual practice with spiritual mind treatment to set in motion the law in a new direction, to produce the change within us that accepts the fact that God is all there is. And then the other approach is kind of the let's do it all at once approach, which is the dissolution of the ego that is talked about in the Eastern cultures. See, what is it that holds all of these ideas that we believe to be true? It's our intellect and our ego. Right? I believe the ego is a child of the intellect, because the ego is nothing more than a series of ideas, of beliefs that we hold about who we are and the way things ought to be. So this is why you'll hear spiritual practices that are designed to shatter the jar. The ego is the jar that holds all of these erroneous ideas, and if it could be broken, then we could be free of them at once. And meditation, as I described, the analytical meditation, the single point meditation, many different techniques of meditation that eventually help us to do that. Eventually help us to let go of our attachment to these ideas, our attachment to that this is the way things ought to be. These ideas of separation, these ideas that work their way into our lives and then out picture as circumstances in our lives that really do not reflect the spiritual truth of our being. So I invite you this week, I invite you to consider, how much time are you spending doing the one thing that you are capable of doing that no other creature on this earth can do as far as we know? And that is reflecting upon thought, on consciousness, on belief, on faith. Reflecting upon your own life and asking yourself, what would I have to believe in order for this to seem reasonable? What would I have to believe? And ask yourself, well, what do you want to believe? What is it that you choose to believe? You have that ability and that responsibility. What is it that you choose to believe? And are you passionate about it? Are you passionate about it? Are you committed to it? Are you dedicated to it? And can you put it into practice? And if you don't get it the first day or the second day, if you miss your practice, don't give up. It's like exercise. Don't give up. Just go back and start over again. Of all of the things that we are capable of doing, self-reflection is probably the most unique and the most important. Let's not waste time. Let's not waste our time trying to do the things that the rest of creation does easily and naturally. But let's take that uniqueness that we have, the spiritual uniqueness, to discover consciousness, to change consciousness, and to bring ourselves into the realization of the presence that is already there. As we do that, the things in the external circumstances in our lives take care of themselves. This is what's meant by seek ye first the kingdom, and everything else will be added unto you. Seek ye first the kingdom, the presence of God within, and all else will be added unto you. So try it tonight. Try it tonight before you go to bed. Take a few minutes. Ask yourself, as you reflect upon your day, ask yourself, what was I thinking? If you're like me, you'll have a good chuckle for a while. Then think about how you want to change it and go into your spiritual practice. Do that before you go to sleep. Do your practice again in the morning. Do your practice whenever you can during the day. Keep your mind on God. And watch how the record of your thinking, the record of your believing, the circumstances in your life change before your very eyes. And so it is.